Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a sling here. Now, the type of sling that I'm going to just model on here is quite common to the automotive, like automobile, passenger car style slings, I think. I'm not sure how they differed, uh, if at all, with the larger, heavier trucks, but I have seen the same sling bars on really heavy duty older wreckers, and I've seen this bar, this sling bar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the rubber slings, but maybe with a piece of chain as well, because it really says, like right at the outset, tow truck wrecker, right? Like kind of like this, like in this photo here. See how there's this sling bar where the two cables come down? I mean, this is a heavier truck, right? Because it wouldn't have two cables here otherwise. And then there's the bar, the sling bar, which is identical to the one that's on this truck. Okay, so I'm going to add these. I'm just going to make them out of thin paper, and then maybe just add a piece of chain, and that'll just sort of finish off the rear of the truck in terms of, the wrecker, the crane, and all this really interesting detail on the back that really signifies wrecker or tow truck combination thereof. Okay. Okay, so now we're going to attach these sling straps, which are made a little bit longer than need be. Again, right? Remember how I mentioned that? Making things extra long because you can always trim them off later. And it's the best way to actually, in my experience, to get a part to fit, because you can trim it off. Because sometimes you got to adjust things. And if you're trying to get this end exact to this end with moving parts, you're going to have a real handful. Or this way, well, I'll show you. So I take a little bit of this crepe paper. I'm just going to put a dab on the top of this sling bar here. Upper sling bar, whatever it's called. I don't know if that's the exact terminology, but for the purposes of this tutorial, we'll just call it that. And then I'm just going to lay that on there like that. Okay. Notice how I added a couple little extra pieces there for the chain. If it's a heavy truck like this, it's a good idea to have some chain on there. There's lots of chain on these trucks. Okay. Okay, so here's the wrecker deck with the sling all chained up and rigged and so on. So you can see I've added a little bit of chain here and on the sides. I left this one hanging. I cut it a bit short, and it wouldn't have looked right if I had wired it up to this bottom sling bar, so when it was in tension there anyway, but it's probably going to be like that. So I just left it because they're hooked. They probably be hooks on there anyway, so just leave it hanging for a little extra character. And then I just decided to run this center chain. It's the rigging and chain that really makes these things stand out and give them character. So I just thought I would add that piece of chain in there just so I can pull that sling frame up like that and sort of lock it in place. Okay, so I just want to touch on something here with this kit that I obviously never noticed until now. It's a minor issue, easily fixed. You'll see here, I'll show you, like the tires here, when they fit onto the rims, there's a fair amount of play there. See that? See that? Now that is probably due to, I would say, probably shrinkage in the molding process. Or maybe it's deliberate, I don't know. Better that it's loose than tight. Now, the way to fix this is to take some Tamiya tape, just lay it on a piece of styrene plastic, and then cut a 3mm wide strip, or a little bit less, with a straight edge like this. Okay. Cut it 20 millimeters long and it'll fully wrap around. And then take your tire and it fits on perfectly. So you can just paint those tires separately and then just CA that, and that's not coming off, so the tape will be fine. You can paint right over it, put the tape on later, and that just cleans up the rims and match to the tire quite nicely. Okay. Okay, so I find that if you're going to install these cabinet doors in the closed position, depending on how you want to model it, like some you might want to have the cabinet door coming up, or some down so that they act like a small little table. So I just did the forward ones, so they'll just hinge downwards and they're going to be closed anyway, and then the rear ones I'll have so they open up like a table. But I'm going to close this one up, so, but if I do, I think it's a good idea to just put a block, a filler block in there. That way you don't have to put any glue around the edge of the cabinet door to make it, you know, that would mess it up. That way you can just glue that right to that little filler block and you'll get a nice finish around the edge of the door. Okay. Okay, so I whipped up a couple of these little hydraulic sticks for the rear sling and the hydraulics and winches, etc. What I used was just a HO scale 2x4 strip. Okay, 8204. And then this by Plastruct. Evergreen doesn't make anything smaller than 20 thou, so this is 0.015 thou. And I just made a bunch up just with a lighter, just heat the end, and like I do the HO scale door handles, same way. And then I just drilled holes and slipped them in like this, and then nipped them off, so I got, you know, a few strips, right? So these trucks are modified all the time. I grew up with friends of mine that were tow truck drivers, and every one of their trucks were different. They were always changing and modifying things. So this one probably originally had a couple of sticks in there, but I decided I would just put a strip right here, 6 of them or 7, because some of them had the modification of the hydraulic lift at the back here. People that know these trucks would understand that, but this one doesn't have that. But I'm going to put them right, one strip there, and then another strip in there like that to CA it on. Looks kind of cool, I think. Okay, so here's a little tip for mounting wiper blades like these photo etched, you know, which are a nice little detail, right? But the problem is when you put the window glazing in and you go to attach your wiper blade, there's a good chance you'll be using CA and you'll fog the you know, you'll wreck the windshield. Okay, so what I do with this kind of thing is I just pin, like I drill 5 thou hole, okay, which is what 20 thou rod is. Okay, 5 thou, which is a 5 thou drill bit for 20 thou rod. Okay, and then I just drill a hole where they're going to go, and then I leave them stubby. Like, see how it's a little stubby on the end there? Okay, so I'll probably just nip that off so I don't knock it off, like right about there. So I got 2 little stubbies there, right? So when I paint this, then I'll just trim that back a little bit more, and it'll be a raw plastic end to it. And then I can CA my little wiper to the end of the rod. Okay, and I won't be touching the window with it. Anyway, that's just one way of doing it, but that's the way I decided I would approach this. And you can see the steering wheel in there. I just used 20 thou rod with the, you know how you use the lighter just to create a rivet head for doing HO scale door handles, right? I did the same. You can see the knob. I just pushed it through the steering wheel, through the little bracket that it comes with, and it's got a nice little steering wheel. Okay, just nice to do that ahead of time, just, you know, before you paint. So okay, so I just want to talk just for a minute or two about this pre-paint phase right here. I'm getting close to the paint phase, and I just want to maybe just refresh or point out a few additional details that I'm adding and I already have added. You can see here that I've added with evergreen plastic scrap a additional toolbox lid that I glued onto the resin block here, and then I built this little extra toolbox tray. I just thought it looked cool. There was room and space back there. You know, throw a timber up there with some chain maybe. You can see the dollies. I cut off the fat. I didn't like the fat white metal crossbars on there, so I made smaller profile ones with the wheel tabs on them. You know, they're on both sides. There's one on this side too, and they just hook up. They drop these dollies underneath when they pick up a car from the rear end or whatever, and then they slide these underneath and hook this all up. I thought that was a nice detail just to clean that up a bit. I'm going to put a spare tire underneath here. That's why I mounted them on the side here. I just want to also point out that I cleaned up the back of this Wrecker frame a bit too. I didn't like the way, let me just take this off for a second. I didn't like the way this was just the leaf spring blocks sort of stuck out. They were just this flat square chunk of metal. So I added some 20 thou scrap and a little right angle on there and drilled a few holes and put a pin in it. Just an additional modification for basic toe pin there. Since I'm on that topic, I just want to mention one thing about this kit. As much as I like it, I mean, I'm a model builder at heart, but was these leaf springs, because they do say, just let me point this out right here. They do say right here, please let us know of any suggestions or ideas you might have to improve our kits. Okay, so I'd like to suggest this. I don't know if this is a production issue or what, but these leaf spring components do not sit properly in this frame. When you put this diff in here, you can see how they deflect inwards. You have to bend them to accommodate the notch. Now you can clean that up with a file. You can change all that yourself or modify it, but it's nice when you have white metal that you have a fixture point like that that's embossed and rabbited out a bit so that they hold together well, right? So, and then you see the back, the rear is not quite as bad, but I sort of bent that. But anyway, that's one area I think that they could improve this kit because it's worth it, right? So that's my input there. So yeah, so I really like the way this Wrecker's turned out. And I just want to say that these are great kits, like just right out of the box. You don't have to do all this, but multimedia kits by nature encourage this. Like if you want to get into kit bashing or scratch building, a injection molded kit is fine, or any kit that you want. But because this is already mixed media or multimedia, you kind of get into the groove, and then you start looking at it. You can see where I added a little hydraulic handle there, and added the pogo sticks here, and and of course the sling. So I'm pretty happy with that so far. I'm just finishing up the light bar. I modified that because I built this up here with the chain rack, and then I'm going to put the light bar on top of here. Now, just in closing quick on this, I want to point out something about the mirrors. So you can buy additional mirror sets, side view mirror set 1 by Showcase Miniatures, and they give you 3 frets. I want to point them out to you and show you the difference between the stock one and the one that they sell separately. Are actually a little bit different, okay? And they're nice too. So with the one that comes in the kit, they're very nice, obviously, right? They just really make the model pop, like that kind of scale feature, like side mirrors like that. But you can bend them in a bit, see, on each side. Now with this one here, like in the kit, this is separate. This little A-frame piece is quite fiddly to install. I use super thin CA for this, by the way. It works great with resin and photo etch. But it's tricky, right, to get it right. You might want to think of doing that before you paint it, otherwise you'll make a mess of it. Now, these are cool, but these are even better, the ones you buy, because I'll show you why. So they have the A-frame fret is built onto the actual mirror assembly, so you just bend it down. So you don't have to worry about it being 2 pieces. Plus they have these little round magnification mirrors, which are kind of cool, including ones for the front fenders of trucks as well. And then they give you a couple of antennas, which are kind of nice, like additional ones. I think that's what those are. I mean, there are ones already on these mirrors. Actually, they go this way. Okay. But, they're very nice. And you can dress up some of your other trucks. But one of the features that I like about the kit mirror set that this doesn't have is the additional mirror placards, metal ones that you apply later. Like I'll just show you on the fret here. Okay. See how, okay, so I already applied the mirrors, so they have these that you glue onto the back. And then there's these with the reflectors on them. So the mirror sets are made up of 1, 2, 3, 4 actual parts for the kit truck, whereas these they don't have those additional little reflectors you can glue on later. So if you wanted to paint these the same color as the cab and then apply the mirror over top so it's nice and clean, that's accommodated in the kit. Okay. So you can see there's just some rust I just shot in thin, right? I'll just leave that. That's a good workable base. You can put washes over that, darker sea gray I like to use, and it'll wipe away, like it'll make a lot of that disappear, right? That's the whole point of glazes and layers. Okay? Is just getting in your base color. Tires I can re-blacken, but some of that I want to show through. Sorry for the wobbly, it's just I could have put this on a piece of solid brass if I wanted to, but it's easier to just nip it off in the end and glue the model together if you use plastic. Okay. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to highlight some of these rims here. just a little bit more. So I took that thin white that I used for those highlights and I added just a tiny bit of more pigment from a straight bottle of paint, like the factory default mix, right? Just to bring in that paint with a little more white, okay? So I'm going to add just a little bit in here. And then I'll show you what I'm going to do. So I have this spare wheel. And I don't want to really get any more white on the chassis, so I'm just going to slip this spare wheel over top like a mask. And I'm just going to hit that a little bit longer. Okay. See that? The rims are already done, right? You don't need to put a pin wash in because look at them. The black that's in there is creating shadow. It's done. Like that's the economy of an airbrush. Like that's how fast you can do stuff if that's what you want, right? If you want that. Okay, so I want to talk to you about this wrecker. Now this wrecker, like the body panels on the side and the rear, I want to be white. Like let's just say was the original color. Okay, so I still have some of that same white that I did the rims with. It's not gloss, it's flat, but I can just with a regular traditional brush touch in some Vallejo gloss varnish over top by hand if I want. Or you can mask it, spray it, coat it later, but you don't want to start spray bombing, rattle canning heavy layers of paint on here because it starts to get soft. Like all the sharp corners and details will go soft on you. Like you get a rounded kind of paint buildup over all the sharp corners and edges, and it tends to take away the sharpness of the model. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to, like I'm not even going to mask off anything. I'm just going to cut in some white here, okay? Just with the airbrush. So this is one of the advantages of the airbrush. So I'm not worried about any overspray anymore because that gets chased away by hand later, okay? But notice how I'm just going to apply a little bit like that, okay? Because I can come back later with a traditional brush and build some of that up, okay? That's all I'm going to do here, okay? So I'm going to put a little bit on the back of the deck here. I'm not going to worry about the mud flaps. Like even if a bit of white gets on there with some mud washes and grays, it'll help create another tonal layer there that's most likely going to be desirable. And this actual frame, like the actual dolly A-frame piece here, I can highlight with a traditional brush later. I'm just going to get a little bit of white on here. And keeping the edges soft, right? That's the beauty of the airbrush, is it automatically softens your transition. See? I mean, look at that. Like this is not, you know, like there's nothing here with a traditional brush yet. But you see what I mean? How the shades blend? And then if you want to pick up or sharpen a lot of this, you do it with pin washes later. Whatever you feel creatively to do. Look how the top of the deck has no white. I don't want white on there. It's a lot of work and rain and tools and, right? Now I'll probably hit some white by hand, a wash of white, like even a pin wash white, which seems the opposite of what you would do, right? For the rims. Because light will hit the different side of the rim, like in the real world oftentimes. It won't always, you know, like reflect in the same way like in a miniature, right? So that's called, you know, reverse pin washing, I call it, where you don't use a dark wash, you use a light wash. It's a look that we're not used to because we don't do it traditionally, right? Okay, so I'm liking that already. So let's just try some on the cab because the bottom of the cab's gonna, well, the cab's gonna be white, but I'm probably gonna two-tone the cab. So let's have a look at the cab in the same way like this. Okay, so after thinking about it for a while, I decided that I would do this cab in a two-tone blue and white um, because it kind of goes along with the theme of SRY Railroad. Like I wanted to pick this truck as a, it's an older truck. It's older than the period I'm modeling, but that's what they would have done anyway. Like they're not going to have a wrecker on site if they need one. Let's just say that to pull some cars that a lot of vehicles that park or over the tracks or you know or whatever, right? To it's got cable winches on it, so it's a SRY work truck. And why would they invest in a brand new truck just to sit there when they only use it a few times of the year? So I'm going to paint this top part of the cab blue to kind of match that theme, and then I have some decals. Maybe I might, I don't know yet. I might put a meatball red logo on the side, SRY. We'll see. Now this is flat white. So I want to apply just a hint of X2 gloss. Okay, this is a gloss. And what I did was is I took the standard bottle brand new and I just topped it up with isopropyl to the rim here, where my thumb is. Stirred it up good, so that's what I'm going to use. So that way it'll have some hint of gloss. Like I don't want to completely gloss coat this cab. Like I don't like that when things are too shiny. I don't like water that's too shiny. I don't like models that are too shiny, trains, anything, because it renders them toy-like. And it's just not realistic in scale. So I thinned down this gloss, and so I'm going to cut some more gloss up to the top of this line here above the door handle because that's where I'm going to mask just below the door handle. And then I'm going to spray that blue, a glossy blue, which I haven't decided on the shade of blue yet, but we'll have a look at that. But right now I'm just going to do that, okay? So you can see that the paint is a little bit heavy here. See the speckling? I don't really like that. That's why I like to do thin coats. But I think I'm just going to go with this for now because I'm not overly worried about a super opaque white to blue line. Okay, because when trucks are aged and weathered in this scale, um, little anomalies like that look kind of cool when you're modeling an older vehicle. Church must be out, so. I like how the black line of the door really is distinctive there. See that? So I'm just going to go with that. And if I find that to be too glossy, then I'll just hit it with semi-gloss at the very end. Okay? Okay, so I'm going to shoot the top of this upper half cab, just XF4 blue, gloss blue by Tamiya. I don't thin the gloss as much. You got to just go trial and error and just see how it comes out. And the finish is very glossy actually, Tamiya. But the more you thin it, then the more semi-gloss it becomes. But you can always remedy that with a clear coat later, right? So as far as masking goes, you just got to do it. You can't really teach masking. You just, like, Tamiya, like I use all Tamiya tape. Here we go again, right? Listen, Tamiya really knows the game when it comes to their paint and their masking. They always have for 20, 25 years. So their masking tape, their thin line tape is the best tape on the market in my experience. So that's why I use it. So I'm just going to paint this upper part blue then. I didn't clear coat the tape because I find Tamiya tape doesn't leak really. And if you use thin coats, you'll be okay. And this is going to be a bit of a weathered truck. You know, it's older, but in the modern age, like in the 2000s era. So if there's a little bit of paint fade, that's okay. Okay, here's a little sneak peek of the cab with the Wrecker, minus the chassis. You can see how it's coming along. I'm fairly pleased with it so far. Like, I think, like, once this kit's finished, you know, mounted on the chassis, you know, with the wheels and the other details and the light beacons, I think it's gonna look pretty cool. You know, it's really cool. Just give you an idea of where we're headed here. Okay, so I'm just going to do the rear brake lights here now, and I'll show you how I like to do them, particularly in this scale anyway, because they're so small and almost seemingly insignificant, but they are nice details to add, right? And to try to do them, with an air of authenticity. So I just take some Vallejo flat red, in this case 71003 right here, just the red. Remember how I put Vallejo over top of Tamiya? No problem, right? Because it's water based, and if you're using I mix this with water. So if I'm using water, well, it's not going to touch the Tamiya because there's no IPA in Vallejo paint. So I just take a little bit of water and I flood the inside of these holes here, just so they're nice and wet. And then I take some straight pigment from the bottle, and then just dab it in, and the water sort of sucks the pigment into the cavity and leaves a nice crisp finish, right, along any seam, like even along the side of like everywhere. Like, it's a good technique, I think. It's a type of flood painting that I've talked about, where you add a bit of water first and you chase it with the pigment, and the water capillaries and pulls it into all the little grooves nice and clean, so you don't blob paint over the edges and stuff of details, right? So I put this on first, and now I'm going to take this excellent Tamiya X27 clear red. I love their clear colors, man. Oh, they're like, you think, oh my goodness, okay, so you'll need one bottle if you take care of it forever. So I just take, a little bit of it straight. Like, I don't add any IPA. Like, see how there's only half in here? Like, I want to use it pure, right? I don't put any isopropyl alcohol in this. I just use it straight from the bottle because I'm only dabbing in small little circles and lights. Like, even for 1/25th scale, this stuff is awesome. When you're doing lights, like the amber color, the red, they have yellow, green, blue. So what I do is I just take it and I just dab it in. Fairly heavy, right? Like, put a good bead in there. Oops, I think I went over a bit there. I'll just be quiet for a second. Normally I wouldn't, like on camera you're always fighting everything, so everything's moving. Normally I just do it like this. There we are. Okay, so, and those end up looking pretty good actually. Once they dry glossy like that, and they reflect light really well. So I find those are as good as any method for doing brake light reflectors and so on. So I'll do the top of the cab this way, but paint it orange first with Vallejo. I'll probably use this orange by Vallejo 71083 with the clear orange X26. Yeah, I really like these paints. In fact, I do, like, I'll just say this in closing. I do thin this paint when I want to do window tinting. Like, if I want to use the green, like for the sun, like a window tint on larger scale, then I'll thin it and spray it through the airbrush, and it looks really cool. Or you can spray this over an existing flat red color, whatever, to create a kind of candy apple color. But that's it for another day, right? But anyway, these are nice to have on hand as well, and I really like them. So, okay. Okay, so I'm going to be installing some of these little amber lights. You know, there's the beacon here and then some other marker lights on top for safety, cautionary lights, and then there's these amber signal lights that go on the side of the cab here. There's a little ident in the side. It's hard to see maybe, and I like to just clean it out a little bit, like the paint with a little drill bit. Just you always get like a better glue or a better adhesive connect, like when you scrape the paint away, I find, because what happens ultimately, especially with CA, is the CA hardens the paint than the original paint. Like if you put a spot of CA onto a model surface and a week or two later, or actually even sooner than that, but it gets worse as it gets older, it hardens that area of the paint and it fractures and breaks away from the original plastic surface and comes off with the part. So like with just the slightest amount of shear, the C8 parts will just break right off. So if you can pin them or take advantage of, like in this case, let's just say here's the surface of the model, and then you have a little indent like this, and then you have a model part with a pin. You don't want any paint in between there. You just want, the CA or adhesive to hold the part. Because if you have any paint in there, like if this is the surface of the model, and then this is the paint layer, and then you put the glue on there, and then the part, well, what happens is the CA hardens this paint and it breaks away eventually and comes off with the part. And this is the original surface of the model. So this paint layer breaks away because the glue is attached to it. So because paint isn't really a very good adhesive, especially on resin. So you want to try to make sure that you have a good connect between two non-painted surfaces when you're using CA, especially with small parts, because they end up practically falling off eventually, okay? Okay, now the the dreaded windshield. This is kind of a sort of a one-shot deal, right? I wouldn't normally film this, but I think I'm going to, because I think it's good for the community and it's a good test for my modeling dexterity and pressure. I love challenge. I think since I've been a kid, it was the model building. One of the main appeals was the challenge of doing things at a different level or taking it to another level in terms of detail, and I still do as an adult. And I guess I get a real challenge and enjoyment out of the reward that comes, when you are successful. But anyway, let me point out a couple things before I do this. I'll just tell you what I'm going to do. So I got the windshield right here. I don't know if you can see that there. And I kind of sanded it to shape and got it as good as I can live with, okay? So it's going to go in like that. And I'm just going to glue this side first and leave it, and then glue the other side just to instill a little bit of curvature in it. if that's possible. I better make sure that I have the tools in place, because this is like heart surgeon work or brain surgeon work in some regards, for the hobbyist, I mean. So, okay, so this is, I'll show you what I'm going to use for adhesive. Normally I use Formula 560. A lot of you are familiar with canopy glue. This stuff works good. I've used it for big RC models and stuff when you tape things down, but for tiny parts like this, I want a faster cure time, and I'm going to use GAC 500. This is the same stuff. Actually, this is better than, or probably the same derivative of canopy glue. All the hobby products that you get always come from some commercial brand of professional artistic supply. So this is gloss extender for fluid acrylic colors. This stuff dries really fast and it's super high gloss. I use it for my water effects, right? So that's what I'm going to use. So it dries, like, I mean really fast. Like not cures, but kicks off quite rapidly. So I'm going to just put a bead on the inside here, and this will dry, you know, gloss. Like, it won't leave a matte finish, but rather a gloss finish. And I mentioned it before, it's really just another adhesive. Paint is a form of adhesive, right? Okay, so that's what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to drop it in like this. Yeah, I'm just going to leave that now. Now, what I can do is, this is where it gets dicey, where you should leave it alone, right? But anyway, what I'm going to do is just a wet brush, a bit of GAC 500. I'm just going to leach in a bit like that, and then I'm going to leave it. See the white there? You think, oh no, right? That's going to virtually disappear so that it looks like this is what the front windshield was like too. And look at it. Look how nice that is. Isn't that nice? GAC 500 for window glazing adhesive. So even if you run out a bit onto the windshield, it disappears.